present, I declare the motion passed. Stamp duty amendment number 2, Bill 2017.
Council now has become committee of the whole council to consider the stamp duty amendment number 2, Bill 2017. And members will refer to the appendix to the script for the debate and voting arrangements for the bill. I will first deal with the clauses with no amendment. I now propose the question to you that the following clauses stand part of the bill. Clause 1, 2, 4, and 9. Does any member wish to speak? I now put the question to you that the clauses read out that the clock stand part of the bill. Would those in favor please raise your hands? Those against please raise your hands. I think the question is agreed by the majority of the members present. I declare the motion passed. Clause 3. Honorable James TO will move his 8 amendments to amend Clause 3 as set out in the appendix to the script. The Secretary for Transport and Housing will also move his 3 amendments to amend Clause 3 as set out in the appendix to the script. Members may now proceed to a joint debate on the original clauses and the amendment. I will first call upon Honorable James TO to speak and move his 1st to 4th amendments. Then I will call upon the Secretary to speak, but the Secretary may not move his amendment at this stage. As Honorable James TO has requested his relevant amendments be voted upon separately, Honorable James TO's 1st to 4th amendment will be put to vote one by one after the joint debate has come to a close. As for the Secretary amendment and the Honorable James TO remaining amendments, they will be dealt with according to the arrangement set in the appendix to the script. Honorable James TO, you first move your 1st to 4th amendments. And President, thank you. These are minor and technical amendments. When I read them out, I have to read out them precisely. The first amendment is this. And James TO, please move your amendment first. I move that I move to first my 4th amendment to amend Clause 3 as set in the appendix to the script. My first amendment that for the AA and for the as proposed definition of single residential property by adding the before paragraph a unit and a flat roof situated in the same building. There's probably a less controversial, simple reason is that the administration accepted my amendment. Hang on. Had accepted my amendment. So that also insert an A pair A B. Of course, the wording from the administration is that a unit and a adjacent flat roof situated in the same building. One minute. The difference that is that I convinced the administration that some the flat roofed in English, let's say 8 stories high, the first 3 stories, 3 floors, or a commercial portion, or for elderly homes and so on. When you get to the 4th floor, there's a flat roof extended from the building. Inside is a residences. And now the administration insists it must be an adjacent flat roof. I'm fine with that. I think in most of these cases occur like this. Why I want to expand the definition further, that to include a flat and unit flat roof situated in the same building. So it's not extended from your own flat. What kind of flat roof is that? You may not know that is how some buildings look like. That the flat roof of a building, let's say you have a flat block A and B, so A is facing their street and B is facing, well, the inward side. So block B has a flat roof, and usually since block B you just have to join to it, so therefore flat roof would not be sold to Block A. However, for Shanghai Street or Reclamation Street, these were rather old district areas. That for some reason, when it was first sold, let's say the developer sold the flat roof of, they're supposed to be sold to flat B. However, that flat roof was sold to the owner of flat A. Let's say for the owner of flat 2A is also the owner of flat roof of flat roof of 2B. Because on the second floor lobby, they have a door that have access to the flat roof. That's quite peculiar, because the flat roof on the second floor, let's say, is owned by flat A and able to peer inside of block B. This is quite strange and probably not desirable. From the outset, it was set out like this. So a flat roof in the same building. I don't know why the administration had insisted on using the word adjacent. So just going back, so then we did on the issue of abuse, with someone abused that I intend to buy the flat roof, which is might be quite expensive, and while the flat itself might cost less. Because at present, during the second reading, the DAB Ting-kwong once commented, why not agreed on the exterior wall amendment? The exterior wall could be quite expensive. It would cost advertising of hundreds of thousands. So the building or the flat attached to it, when it costs less, if we say that in a single residential property, the real intent is aiming for the exterior wall. That will be worth of tens of millions or hundreds of thousands rent per month. So it will over on 10 or 20 million or so on. So the flat itself only costs quite a few million. So that means quite advantageous. You'll be taxed to your flat without paying the stamp duty for the exterior wall. And such comments, I can't rule out that it is possible. At the same time, for the flat roof or exterior wall, so it's adjoined to a unit and may lead to abuse, so the intention is actually the flat roof, the exterior wall, and the roof instead of the flat itself, that led to tax savings. That's one possibility. Another possibility would be that predominantly cases that Cynthia L said that the flat is adjoining to the flat roof or the exterior wall. If there's no undivided shares, then there should be no problem. Then, according to the existing tax regime, they will treat it as a single residential property. In some cases, they have one share. Let's say there's only 60 shares in the building, and the roof or the exterior wall made up of one share each, and the roof they were divided into 4 shares, and the flat roof made up one share. One has undivided share, then oh no. So if don't treat it as a single residential property and treat it as a single instrument covering multiple property, then the buyers and with this one share of the roof or the exterior wall or the flat roof, so you claim that one depend on the circumstances. What happened to the unsuccessful cases? Either they won't sell it or they sell separately. They will sell the 10 shares of the unit instead of the 1 share of the flat roof or exterior wall. So in this case, it will become an orphan bit, and when it comes to maintenance, the whole owners corporation will be in trouble. So after they've sold the flat, they get the millions or tens of millions, the unit, and the remaining 1 share of roof or flat roof. Why do I mix it up? Because this situation is quite common. And for the exterior wall, roof, or flat roof, in case of leakage, spalling, and you claim that that person is a land owner that had one share. Let's say they have 60 shares, and then you ask that one owner, you can't locate the owner of this one share. So what would happen? So if you adjoin to the unit, that the owner will not run away because it's still there. In any case, you just have this put up notice. So because the unit worth $1 million, they won't not default on pays of $1 million. If we sold the unit, then they will ignore any payment request. Due to our tax regulations to combat abuse or multiple residential property under a single instrument, you fail to take into account of this. You make a lot of the landlord would sell only the units instead of selling together with the undivided share of roof, exterior wall, and so on. In the future, you will leave it to local while we have a lot of district officers below which the district council will bring a lot of trouble for them, and each IOs will come chase after you, and then this local would refer to Frank Chen because that's the Frank Chen policy. So because they won't accept the amendment, okay, maybe it accept part of the amendment because 3 of them have been accepted by the administration. But however, for the same building, the other roofs is not doing. So you won't accept the exterior wall amendment because a few of my amendments have been rejected by you. So for the building maintenance issues, we never imagined that the amending the tax regulation will lead to building maintenance issues. Most so I found Wong Ting-kwong coming to me and not supporting because it support the administration only the administration amendment. So he had his grounds. However, these grounds are laughable, and in the committee stage, he never raised that. And the whole child medical comment actually supported my rationale, and urged the administration to consider. Well, frankly speaking, I don't understand his rationale for this. So there will be consequences in the future. So if possible, I urge other members, please consider my argument. Especially during the bill committee stage, the Julius Holdage had supported me, and he understood the intention, because if you engage in conveyancing work, you understand you'll do shares as well, the IO meetings, and look at the DMC, that you'll be aware of this. Well, pardon me, my colleagues. If you know about this issue, this may be technical. I hope that you can speak, especially to this post-established camp on the newly elected councillors. You're aware of this because you're a surveyor yourself. If you get what I mean something, I hope you can say something. If you support, please explain why and what is the likelihood of being abused. President, I found it quite strange when Wang Ting-kwong said that exterior wall would lease for $100,000, and some of the roof would lend it to the advertising agency, and now the administration claims that for the same building, a unit with a roof is found to be acceptable. Isn't roof would cost a lot of money? So putting up billboard would generate a lot of income as well. So you need to apply for a billboard to put in roof. You need to do that for the exterior wall. Why the administration accept the roof but not the exterior wall? His administration claims that this is a rare occurrence. How much research have you done? So which of the colleagues provide such advice? Is it land registry? Have they done any research and come with some statistics? Nothing. It's only on perception, on an officer's will. President, I hope that the First Amendment and for the single residential property to include a unit and a flat roof situated in the same building, the administration insists on using the word adjacent, so that's the difference. The Second Amendment, that the single residential property includes a unit and a garden situated in the same building. The administration originally insists on the adjoining gardens situated building. So for the non-adjoining cases, that would be rare. I agree so. And an adjacent case is quite rare. for the same building, and he claimed that within the same building, the garden is kind of 500,000 square feet, and then the unit itself only 300 something square feet, more like an subdivided units. So you're more intended to purchase the garden. In this case, I can't rule out the likelihood. However, the likelihood of abuse, comparatively speaking, give it some thought. I'm glad to heard from Ms. Chen that we appreciate my good intentions, that do not intend to help people to abuse. You have to weigh the likelihood of the abuse, because, or in some circumstances, why for the new territories, you may be aware of that. Because the city dwellers like to go on hobby farming, and you can go on any farm. Hon James knows that he's from the agricultural sector for a kind of a hobby farming. Just lease a land, and then some developer work like this. So in the housing estate, they actually have a piece of farmland inside a small parcel, and actually not adjacent to the unit, but situated within the same estate. So allow the occupants to farm, so that you can do some family bonding, do some farming, and harvesting produce and so on.
So.
But now this may become a case of one single instrument covering multiple properties. The Fourth Amendment, a unit and a roof situated above in the same building. Now, the administration's amendment is a single residential property includes a unit and a roof situated in the same building, so there is not much difference. I just want to say if there's to be abuse, well, I'll speak again in the second round. I now propose the question to you that the first to fourth amendments moved by Mr. James TO be passed. Secretary for Transport and Housing. Madam Chair, the aim of the bill is to tighten the exemption arrangement under the new residential stamp duty regime for Hong Kong permanent residents, Hong Kong PR. This is in response to the views of this council and the public that there is avoidance of NRSD payment using a single instrument to buy multiple properties. During the Bills Committee stage of the bill, the administration has been following closely the views expressed by the Bills Committee and deputations and also members of the public. We fully appreciate the concerns expressed about what is considered a single residential property. Now, we want to minimize the impact on genuine users by tightening the exemption arrangement. So in the bill, we've included common examples accounted by the IRD. For example, 1, a unit and a roof immediately above the unit. 2, a unit and an adjacent garden. And 3, a unit that became a single unit following the demolition of the walls or any part of the walls separating two adjoining units. The Bills Committee considered whether, under the definition of a single residential property, more examples could be included to facilitate the public. In response to the views of the Bills Committee, the administration agrees to move 3 amendments to include more common examples. The amendments are already set out in the appendix to the script. Specifically, for the definition of single residential property under Clause 3.1, we are going to move 3 amendments. 1, in the original bill is a unit and a roof immediately above, immediately situated in the same building, is now to be revised to a unit and an adjacent roof situated in the same building. In other words, there is no need for the roof to be immediately above the unit. And second amendment is a unit and an adjacent flat roof situated in the same building. And the third one is apart from the connection of two adjoining units, we also include vertically connected units as examples of single residential property. The Bills Committee has considered the proposed amendments of the administration. The Bills Committee has raised no objection to these amendments, so I ask members to support these amendments to be moved by the administration. We've also carefully considered the amendments moved by Mr. James To. On the definition of single residential property, Mr. James To has moved six amendments. 3 of them are very similar to the amendments moved by the administration. That is a unit and a roof, a unit and a flat roof, and the vertically connected units. Now, I would like to explain why the amendments of Mr. James are different than that of the government and why the government's amendments are better. Now, we are proposing to add more examples under the definition of single residential property. That is to include a roof, a unit and a roof situated in a building. Then in Mr. James To's amendment, there is the word situated above, but then to us, roof already means something that's above, so there is no need to include the word situated above in the same building as proposed in Mr. James To's amendment. During the Bills Committee discussion, Mr. James To pointed out that there are some buildings with units with an adjacent flat roof, and this would be sold together. That's why he proposes a unit and a flat roof situated in the same building. And we are proposing a unit and an adjacent flat roof situated in the same building. Now, members believe that Mr. James To's amendment would not lead to abuse, and so that's why we have now moved this amendment. The draft amendment was submitted to the Bills Committee for consideration. The Bills Committee expressed no objection. Compared to the administration's amendment, Mr. James To also moved an amendment that is a unit and a flat roof situated in the same building. That means it could be in any part of the same building and it would be regarded as a single residential property. We believe the administration's amendments could better reflect the consensus of the Bills Committee. As for vertically connected units, there is no difference between the scope covered by Mr. James To's amendment and our amendment. So it covers units that are genuine units that are connected, or units that are vertically connected. It's just a matter of wording. The Bills Committee has considered the administration's amendment and it has raised no objection. So we ask members to support the amendments moved by the administration on the 3 different scenarios and oppose the other amendments proposed by Mr. James To. Apart from the 3 scenarios, Mr. James To has also proposed amendments to include more examples under the definition of single residential property that involves a unit with a garden and units with exterior walls. Now, the administration could not agree to these amendments, as we explained on many occasions at Bills Committee. There are different scenarios involving units with a garden on the exterior wall, so it is not possible to come up with a precise and all-inclusive scenario. So that's why in the bill it is proposed that the IRD will have regard to individual cases and also make reference to the relevant documents and consider whether a property is a single residential property. To minimize the impact on genuine users, the bill includes some common examples under the definition of single residential property. When considering whether to include more examples, we have to strike a proper balance between minimizing the impact on genuine users and in ensuring the effect of the NRSD. We need to avoid abuse. Now, there are already some examples under the definition of single residential property. Mr. James TO is proposing that for a garden or exterior of the garden in the same development should also be considered part of a single residential property. We believe these are rare cases, and it is not in line with the general understanding of the public of a single residential property. That's why it's not appropriate to include these examples. As for a unit and an exterior wall, as we explained to the Bills Committee, it depends on the individual deed of mutual covenant. Usually exterior walls are the common parts of the building. Now, from the relevant records, there are few transactions of exterior walls. And exterior walls do not involve undivided shares in these transactions. In other words, the exterior walls could not be sold, could not be traded separately from the unit. Now, for a unit with an exterior wall that cannot be traded separately, then according to our usual practice of the RLD, this will be considered a single residential property. Now, we have not come across a case of the exterior wall and the unit being traded separately. So these are not common examples. We're worried that if Mr. James TO's amendment is passed, it could lead to abuse. From the IRD's records, in some transaction instruments, where they cover the exterior wall that could be traded separately, the value of the exterior wall could be as much as $9 million. Now, under the current measure, there should be double stamp duty for such transactions of exterior walls only. Now, for Hong Kong PR without any residential properties now, they may just buy a small residential unit together with the exterior with a high value, and then they just need to pay the AVD at scale 2 rates and avoid paying the NRSD. So for these reasons, the administration could not agree to Mr. James TO's amendments. Apart from moving amendments to the definition of single residential property, Mr. James TO has also moved amendment to the documents which may be considered by the collector of stamp duty in deciding whether a property is a single residential property. The RD may consider approved plans, occupation permit, DMCs, and any other documents considered relevant by the collector in deciding whether a property is a single residential property. Mr. James TO is proposing in his amendment that in determining whether a residential property is a single residential property, the collector may have regard to any other document that the collector considers relevant, including all the instruments registered by the land registry in respect of the property. Now, apart from the few key documents listed out in the bill, the collector may consider any other document that is the current provision. So therefore, we do not see the need for this amendment. Madam Chair, I speak and I ask members to support the administration's amendments and oppose the other amendments. Thank you. Does any member wish to speak? Mr. Hon James. Madam Chair, I would like to thank the Bureau for giving a detailed explanation on the amendments, but I would like to just inform you of what happened in the Bills Committee. The Bills Committee had an in-depth discussion of the many scenarios. And Mr. James To is also given substantial views on possible scenarios, and we're grateful to him for his views. Now, so far from our observation, the amendments moved by the administration are very similar to the amendments of Mr. James To in terms of policy intent and approach. Now, when members share the same views, although they on certain amendments, usually the administration will take on board these amendments. So it's the case today. Like the amendment on a unit and a roof. Because transaction of units may include a roof. So we have seen such cases in real life. So we do not exercise discretion and allow an exemption. And this is possible that the genuine user will have to pay more in stamp duty. So we've had discussions on these various scenarios, and in this case, the administration has agreed to move the amendment. But perhaps here I should say this. There's a minor point here that may lead to controversy. That is a unit and an exterior wall. During the Bills Committee stage, or during the Bills Committee discussion, Mr. James To mentioned a case that usually for a unit, it includes the exterior wall. And if the exterior wall is not bought together with the unit, then is it possible that in the end, the exterior wall belongs to nobody?
That was the question asked on that day. If nothing is done to enable exterior wall to get an exemption, there is a chance that in the future there will be buyers who just buy the unit without buying the exterior wall, even though it's included. So no one is responsible for the exterior wall. This may give rise to disputes concerning maintenance and repair of the external wall. There may be disputes amongst owners in relation to the responsibility of maintenance and repair of the external wall of old buildings. When I first heard the query in the Bills Committee, I thought, well, he had a point. When a member proposes amendments, we would carefully consider them. Mr. To only tells us one side of the coin, but we have to discuss about the other side of the coin as well. We wonder, would Mr. To's amendment give rise to potential abuse? Well, just to illustrate it for easy comprehension. If there is no commercial value on the exterior wall, perhaps people won't have a strong view. But what about a piece of exterior wall with high commercial value? that will be a problem. According to Mr. To's amendment, that exemption is given to the exterior wall. New stamp duty is not to be applied. But what if there is a commercial value on the exterior wall? And if it is a substantial commercial value, that means exemption is given to this transaction under Mr. To's amendment, and it will be unfair. Well, Mr. To talks about one side of the coin, but then you have to, well, he said that we will have to build a mechanism to ensure that someone is responsible for the exterior wall. Because when no one's responsible for the exterior wall, there will be disputes. That is one side of the coin, but we have to consider the other side of the coin, because there may be potential abuse. It may be something with a commercial value. If exemption is given, then no tax is to be levied when it should have been. So we have reservations when it comes to Mr. To's amendment. I have explained about the two sides of the coins, and there were detailed discussions in the Bills Committee. I believe Mr. To will have another chance to explain his views. Well, as I've done in the past, in the committee stage, the best part is that members can debate on certain points. If you have questions, if you have doubts, members can raise them in the committee stage. And I've just now expressed my views on the amendment and the Secretary's amendment. If necessary, I will speak again. Mr. James To. I thought Mr. Tony Dare was going to speak. I would like to hear more from members first. Well, however, he did not participate during in the scrutiny of the bill. As I've said, whether my proposed amendments are passed or not, I will support the third reading of the bill, because that is the general principle. I propose these amendments, say for example the exterior wall, which is not accepted by the administration. Mr. Chow talks about abuse. He said that the exterior wall can be of a high commercial value. I think by that he meant that it can be used as an advertising space and not when a bit of concrete falls from it to hurt someone. Well, he did not say anything about potential abuse of a roof. If there is a roof above your unit, then it's a single residential property. You're not charged the new stamp duty. It's not the case that you don't have to pay stamp duty. If there is value to the rooftop, well, it's reflected in the stamp duty. It's not the case that you don't have to pay stamp duty at all. If there is an exterior wall charging a rent of tens of thousands of dollars, well, would you just sell it for, say, $5 million? No, it would easily fetch 10 million. Well, it's just the case that if the unit comes with the exterior wall, then you don't have to pay the additional stamp duty. I can't guarantee that there won't be any abuse, but you can't guarantee that there won't be any abuse of roof either. You see, if you walk in Wan Chai, you will see a lot of roofs, say in Elizabeth House. That is the same. So you agree that roof should be exempted. But it's part of the deal. The chance of it being abused is the same whether it is a roof or an exterior wall. Anyway, well, some members think that exterior wall is worth more than the roof. Well, I think it's just a matter of judgment. Second point, if you say that someone wants a piece of exterior wall but doesn't want to pay the additional stamp duty, and that person finds a small unit in that building, the secretary said that, well, an exterior wall can easily fetch $9 million if it can charge advertising fees. And if you find that 9 million exterior walls that comes with a small unit in the building, and that small unit is for sale, well, actually, there are lots of cases when one single unit is left, that is, one left by a developer. There may be, I don't want to name that developer. It's China something, and there are some developers like that who would like to keep a unit, and that comes with the exterior wall, perhaps for self-occupation or for their mistresses. Maybe to the developer, the exterior wall will come into use one day. There are so many cases. Mr. Frank Chen said that, well, there aren't many transactions involving the roof. Yes, because it's, say, Unit 7A plus roof. So transaction of a roof alone is few and far between. Well, if you can separate the exterior wall and the unit, then there will be a problem. Do you think that there are more number of cases with an exterior wall that comes with a unit, or the other way around, or more cases of exterior wall coming separately? There may be some units that has a street view of maybe an alley or an inside street, so the exterior wall can't be used as an advertising space. And comparing the number of such cases with an exterior wall facing a main street, I can charge you. I have been working with a lot of DMC cases in Kowloon West, just like the deputy chair. Frank Chen said that there are few cases of exterior wall being sold separately. So I'm right. If I can't convince you, and in the end, something happens, well, the Secretary for Home Affairs would say it's the responsibility of the other secretary. And at that time, James To made a proposal. Well, some other members, for fear of abuse of the exterior wall, opposed to it, but they are all part of history by then. Because, well, there may be cases of exterior walls not being able to be sold, and they're forgotten, neglected. That would be the responsibility of the administration. Mr. Wang Ting-kwong. I'm the chairman of the Bills Committee. I have a lot of respect for the devotion given by Mr. James TO. However, sometimes he likes to split hairs. Well, when it comes to amendments, say the purchase of a residential unit that comes with an exterior wall. The DMC of the building, he said, covers a lot of documents, building plans, documents relating to title. The stamp collector, the commissioner for the inner revenue, have power to refer to these documents when deciding whether it is a single residential property. We have had detailed discussions, and I have carefully considered Mr. James TO's proposed amendments. When I asked DAB members to support it, once a decision is made, say for example Mr. James TO's proposed amendment, the value of the exterior wall and the value of the unit, if there are problems, well, this new stamp duty will not be charged. Mr. TO talked about old buildings and maintenance and repair of exterior wall. And if the transaction comes with the exterior wall, collector of stamp duty and the commissioner of inland revenue would be more than happy to grant exemptions. Do we let these people off? Or do we strictly implement the requirements? I'm not going to get bogged down on some minor points. The major purpose of these measures is to cool down the exuberant property market. I hope that you will understand the reason and support the administration's proposed amendments. I do think that Mr. TO's attitude is right. He said at the outset that he supports the third reading. He just would like your support for his proposed amendment.
Any other members would like to speak? N. Chang. So I just want to say a few words, just to cast out James TO's demons. Just for the buildings that with roof that can be adjacent or adjoined with the same deed, why the exterior wall cannot be belong to the same deed. So I experienced it myself. I once owned a certain shares in a building, and its roof was mine as well. I remember they put up huge billboards on the roof, and the income gets you over 1 million. When it gets to my turn, I found a lot of problems. First, I need to seek the majority consent to set up a billboard on the roof. Since we need to install a metal frame and the loading and kind of issues we need to approve by the government, and for the structure we need to seek the consent of the entire building. So I would have made a lot of money every month or every year. At the end, it didn't work out. So it's not that simple. Unless you own the entire building, the ownership of the roof and all of the exterior wall are owned by yourself, then they'll be up to you. In the past, you may know that Kowloon West had a lot of old buildings. As we know that these of the old buildings are excluded exterior wall. So you're only simply buying the third A, let's say. For the exterior wall, whether you paint or you put up any advertising signs, or we may need to have the majority consent of the building, because the exterior wall, let's say for the exterior wall of the second and third floor are adjoined. If you put a very heavy signage on the third floor, and in case of spalling, you may affect the second floor below. So it's quite complicated. So your proposal that a unit with exterior belong to a single transaction. So I think nowadays this scenario that will cease to the amendment to the stamp duty, I don't think how it would help. On the contrary, for the we have a lot of ill-defined ramifications. So we both belong to the geographic constituency of Kowloon West, or rather, you're from the district council constituency. For in Kowloon West, we came across a lot of land homeowners when the exterior wall needs a lot of maintenance. Usually, they split the cost according to their share. It's not that because they haven't bought the exterior wall, they're none of my business. For each homeowner, for the exterior wall adjoining to the unit, in usual cases, I don't have the exact information. However, by my experience, that will be the cost will be borne by the respective floors, and if it affect the overall image, that will be decided by the IO of the building, and so to speak. Mr. Tony, the Honorable Tony Chair. Thank you, Madam Deputy. So for this Stamp Duty Amendment Number 2 Bill, 2017. So like Honorable James TO said, I did not participate in the discussion of the Bills Committee. I had just recently rejoined LegCo. I think we have a definite discussion of this bill. So I heard from the Secretary and from other colleagues, including Honorable James TO. I want to express my personal views, and which are not based on my participation of this committee, since I'm not part of it. First, I will support this amendment. The general principle is to plug any potential loopholes so as not be abused to evade the stamp duties. And the Secretary and Honorable James TO hold different views and offered different amendments. The whole thing, in my view, the Honorable James TO has a very in-depth examination of this bill, and also considered that different scenarios to help to achieve fair treatment. So, Madam Deputy, this sort of principles is generally correct. However, we need to strike a balance that of the likelihood of it being abused. So, on the proposed amendments, I want to comment on them. Firstly, Honorable James TO, which the Secretary insisted on using the word adjacent. So for the wording, it's supposed to give the meaning of they being connected to the unit. So from my own experience, and what Mr. James TO said, that the unit and the freight room may not be adjoined to them. So let's say for units we have bought a flat roof and may not be fall next to the, say they might need to pass through a corridor or adjoined to a different unit. So in this scenario, would it be unfair to others? From this angle, I think Honorable James TO had a point, but will it be abused? So in terms of the residential property, I think there's not a major concern, especially for the old buildings that they are flat roof. They won't be worth a lot of money if they have an authorized structure. So so the possibility or the existence of an authorized structure is of course I must assume that this and all UBWs must be removed. So on the First Amendment, I think to Honorable James TO had a point. For the gardens, the likelihood is smaller because for old buildings, the gardens are very rare in these buildings, and James TO has been very nice. That hope that don't have to be adjacent. So can it not be adjacent? So in balance of possibilities, I believe that the James TO is quite concerned for the older buildings that we have a lot of scenarios that are unexpected. However, for gardens and old buildings, it's quite small, especially for residential property. As for the issue of exterior wall, and the issue raised by James TO, I can't say it don't exist. In most cases for older buildings, and James TO mentioned before that for the older buildings, the developer had retained it shares rights of the exterior wall, especially for the really old buildings. They will not have a share, but a right. Why no shares? Because they don't hope they have the obligation, which the maintenance will be paid by the building, and yet it managed to keep the right interests and rights. For this kind of exterior walls, and due to the advertising, worth quite some money. And like N. Chang said, it's quite different with the roof situation. With the exterior wall, may not need to install a metal frame, or maybe they can paint advertising instead. So it's still worth some money. So the balance of probabilities. So Mr. TO's views of so probabilities of being abused on the unfairness to other people. I think for exterior wall, there will be a greater likelihood of being abused. So in terms of So James To have been quite a strong argument. How about the roof? This should give administration some thought. However, because I'm not part of the Bills Committee, so I need to consider the issue itself. And since there's a great likelihood for abuse, I will support the Secretary. The third amendment, that for the garden in the housing estate and new territories, a lot of the small houses that will hold the development might be a large scale, and for a garden in the same housing estate, so for the it happened in the houses with small garden. However, buying a garden separated from the house and the only make up a small number of cases. So for the garden situated in the same housing estate, I think is a far too wide coverage. So for the third amendment, I would not support Honorable James To. For the fourth amendment, then the Honorable James To hope to adding the unit and the roof situated above in the same building. Because Honorable James To failed to lay out his reasoning, because he reached his time when he speak, he forgot to continue from where he left off. For some structures, it happens. Let's say it have 2 units, and then we two different for unit B, it could 15 floors, and unit A, it could 14 floors. Let's say the one with the 14 floors, they may use the garden or a flat or roof or the flat roof. So it happened to some development. They're using so they claim the highest floor as a roof for it is more like a flat roof. So I wonder if it's due to this that they insert the word above. So what is the definition of roof? You might need to refer to the occupation permit. That how do you define it? For example, unit B with a 13th floor and what the 14th floor. So the roof of the 14A call it a band, or is that the flat roof of unit B? I think generally speaking, the roof, the space above the tallest floor should be referred as a roof. Maybe James To can lay down his arguments why he decide to add the word roof situated above. And for the Secretary, the collector of the stamp duty, subject to individual circumstances, and like Mr. Ting-kwong said, to decide to exempt. So I would like to listen more. For the proposed amendments, there's not much mention. In any case, like Honorable James To said, in some cases could not be anticipated by us. If we preserve the flexibility, it would be great. Because we wanted to investigate whether the buyer would evade these stamp duties, or is purely because it would issue arrest from the deed or the lease that led to difficulty in transactions, and so that we would not lead to maintenance on repairs And so I speak, Deputy, Madam Deputy, Mr. Hon Chow. Thank you, Madam Deputy. So I would like to talk about the exterior wall. I think this we had shared more in-depth discussion with James To for the exterior wall. If we offer this exemption, that would lead to abuse, or simply put, that they have huge commercial value that they would need to pay this stamp duty due to this exemption. So we worry that exemption will be unfair. I heard from James To explanation that I'm not talking about the valuable ones. He raised a point that if they're building for the real old ones, they have an exterior wall or part of it that's actually not street facing, but those facing the back alley that seemingly lack any value, or like you said, that would actually be a liability. So I think about this thoroughly. In this case, a portion exterior wall with no value, and not something I would want to get for free. So even if we was use this move amendment to exempt this from paying stamp duty, however, the owner itself, when they purchase it worth nothing to him, actually bring liability to them. So I'm not interested. So plainly speaking, I'm not. I wouldn't have the incentive to purchase this because it would exempt from the stamp duty. For something that doesn't worth much, or need to bring liability or troubles, that something I wouldn't want to purchase. It's not that for tax savings or exemptions that suddenly I would have the incentive to purchase it or bought it together. But I must point out that the intention of James To, why during the Bills Committee stage, while listening to him, his viewpoint I had quite agreed. At least, and it's just not for the.
Now, we're talking about something that has no value, but it's exterior wall and may end up being a liability. So you want to deal with it. You don't want it to become something under nobody's charge. I endorse his view in that sense, because someone has to take responsibility for the maintenance and repair of such parts of the building with no value. So he is entirely right in making that point. But to address the issue, maybe we need to give incentives to owners, not through exemption of stamp duty, but rather we give incentive to owners to buy this part of the building as well. But it's not to be done through exemption of stamp duty, because this part of the building has no value in any case. Even if you will let me pay less stamp duty, I have no incentive to buy it. So to address Mr. James To's issue, we can consider other means. Let's say if there are such cases of a part of building under nobody's charge, yes, the government needs to come up with measures to encourage people to buy or take charge of that part of the building as well. But maybe it's outside the scope of the bill today, because today we're just focusing on the stamp duty arrangement for one instrument covering multiple properties. Now, if we do not intend to deal with the issue mentioned by Mr. James To through exemption of stamp duty, but we're still offering the stamp duty exemption, then we need to consider a possible downside. Abuse, that was just mentioned. Then it's not fair if we allow abuse. Because then for exterior walls with commercial value, huge commercial value, then there could be abuse. For example, I see a small unit in a building, then can I buy a tiny unit and at the same time I buy that exterior wall with huge commercial value together, so I could save a large amount in stamp duty. So the government will lose out. So we have to consider this possibility. So the government is not collecting revenue that's due. So we need to strike a balance. And as I weigh both possible scenarios, I'm more worried that if we allow the exemption, it may lead to abuse, and so more damage may be done in comparison. That's why I like to explain my viewpoint here. But I must still say the intention of Mr. James To is good. That is that there may be an exterior wall with no value. It may become a liability. So we need to do something about it. We need to make sure that someone will take responsibility for such exterior walls. I agree with him in that sense. But perhaps we should resort to other measures to make buyers buy the exterior as well. It's not to be done through stamp duty exemption, because the person won't want to buy the exterior just because you are offering a bit of exemption in stamp duty. So perhaps I'll stop here. I wonder if Mr. James To has other points to make. Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. James To. Well, Mr. Chairman, actually I've exhausted all my arguments almost, but just a few words. Let's consider it from this angle. Now it seems that we all know exactly what we're talking about, because we've been having this discussion for some time. But let's consider all transactions are done through real estate agents. That is, a seller releases his unit to the estate agent, and then there's a buyer. And we say, after we pass all the bill here, then people know, okay, it includes the roof or the flat roof, then people are sure, fine, so there's not going to be a problem. What if we say it includes the exterior wall? Let's say the exterior wall belongs to individuals, not common part. You don't need to mention common part. And let's say there's a divided share for the exterior wall, or there is a share for the exterior wall rather. So then the buyer will be a lot more concerned. When the real estate agent speaks to the buyer may say, well, but this is not considered a single residential property. It may be regarded as a non-residential property, and then we don't know what the stamp duty is, and then the buyer may say, well, let's forget about it. So because there are uncertainties in such transactions, so the owner may have difficulties trying to sell this part of the building, or that is the exterior wall. So it's possible there could be this consequence. And so we say, well, let's rely on the IRD to give the exemption. Now, Mr. Ting-kwong sounded very confident. He thought the government would always be reasonable, kind, and sensible in allowing the exemption. He's very confident about that. But honestly, now this... I've been moving many amendments for this particular bill since 2012, and so many of the people come to me. They say, how come this is done this way? It's so unfair. It's about the IRD's assessment. So that's why during the second reading debate, I mentioned these cases. Now, if you don't put it down clearly, I hope you understand it's not a matter of trust. The IRD is the IRD. The IRD has this special nature. That is, collecting tax is important. Yes, I agree, collecting tax is important. But in a case like this, which is borderline, then the IRD will always say, no, let's charge the tax. That's what the IRD would always do. That's because we give the mandate to IRD to do that. Because if we don't collect tax, Hong Kong can't survive. It's the same with any governments or any countries. So we say no, the IRD will be reasonable in making an assessment, and they will say this has to be a single residential property. But no, but we've got many complaints, and there's no way you could take the government to court because compared to the little bit, the extra stamp duty you have to pay compared to the court case cost, of course, no one will take the government to court. But in some of these cases, I think really the IRD is being totally unreasonable. So I've looked at the actual cases. I've looked at the IRD ordinance, the Inland Revenue Ordinance. I've also considered such cases left out. Now, let's say there's an exterior that costs hundreds of millions of dollars, so I buy a small unit together with the exterior wall, and then I will stand to gain. But no, we're not talking about those cases. We're talking about something else. And it's through the enforcement of the Inland Revenue of the previous ordinances, then we find that IRD would always charge taxes. They won't reason. That's what we found from real experience. I'm telling you, there are many such cases mentioned by the Law Society and others, and it is so unfair. And these are the cases left out in our consideration. But anyway, I'm not going to dwell on this any longer. Mr. Chairman, we all well-intentioned. You all recognize my good intention. I'm glad about that. At least I've never heard anyone say, oh no, you are trying to help someone abuse the law. No, you all know I have good intention. And I have also been keen that there's need to tighten the exemption for a single instrument covering multiple properties, even back then when the government was adamant about not doing it. So I pushed it. So, because I don't want abuses too. So therefore, for my amendments, I've weighed the risk very carefully to make sure there's no, to avoid abuses as far as possible. If I have doubt, why do I want to do this? Why do I want to take responsibility? I don't need to move the amendments. No one will complain. But I am prepared to show that this political responsibility or consequence. But it seems that I won't need to. It seems that I'm going to be voted down. So anyway, I would like to thank you for appreciating my good intention. Now some say that I'm coming with extreme cases, but no. I'm not trying to put loopholes in the bill and allow abuses. No, that's not the case, and I thank you for seeing that. Does any other member wish to speak?
Secretary for Transport and Housing, would you like to speak? Secretary, thank you. I have been listening very carefully to members from the second reading. I carefully listened to their reasons and justifications. There is only one purpose to this bill, and there is only one purpose to these amendments: to make this bill as good as possible. The views of the Bills Committee, including the views of Mr. James TO, has been largely incorporated into our CSAs. For those that we have not taken on board, it's not a matter of right and wrong. We have to strike a balance between maintaining the effectiveness of demand-side management and taking into account the needs of genuine users. Let me repeat here. Well, the definition of single residential property may not cover all the views of members. There is a provision under the definition of single residential property even when a case is not included in these common examples, it doesn't mean that it doesn't constitute single residential property. We do think that it is more appropriate to let the Inland Revenue Department to decide whether it is a single residential property after having taken into account various factors and documents. I do think that the department will give full consideration of all the circumstances. Mr. To may be of the view that this is not ideal. We have taken into account different views, even opposing ones. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all members of the Bills Committee. Members may have different views. They may refuse to budge, but I can hear that members respect one another's reasons and good intentions. I so submit. Mr. James To, would you like to speak again? No. Before I put to you the question on Mr. James To's First Amendment, I would like to remind members that if Mr. James To's amendment is passed, the Secretary may not move his Second Amendment. And I'll put the question to you that the First Amendment moved by Mr. James To be passed. Will those in favour please raise their hands? Ms. Starry Lee claims her division. The bell will ring for 5 minutes.
開始表決。
Voting begins. Mr. Jeremy Tam. Chairman, I would like to declare that myself and my family members have bought a new property, but it's not completed that. In short, I won't benefit from this bill. Please check your votes. If there are no questions, voting closes. Result displayed. Members from FC 27 present, 9 for, 17 against. Those from GC 26 present, 14 for, 12 against. I declare the question is not agreed by majority of 2 groups of members who are present. I declare the amendment negatived. Mr. Riley. Chairman, I move that in event of further divisions being claimed at this meeting in respect of the stamp duty amendment number 2 Bill 2017, the committee will proceed forthwith with division after the bill has been run for 1 minute. I now propose the question to you, that is the one proposed by Ms. Lee. Those in favor, please raise their hands. Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority of each of the 2 groups of members. I declare the motion passed. In the event of further divisions to be claimed in relation to Stamp Duty Amendment Bill number 2 Bill 2017, the committee shall proceed forthwith the division after the bell has been rung for 1 minute. I now put the question to you is that the second amendment moved by Mr. James To be passed. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. Mr. Hon James claims a division. The bell will ring for 1 minute. Voting begins. Please check your votes. If there are no questions, voting closes. Result displayed. Members from FC 28 present, 8 for, 19 against. Those from GC 26 present, 14 for, 12 against. I think the question is not agreed by majority of each of the 2 groups of members, that is those returned by FC and those by GC who are present. I declare the amendment negatived. And I put the question to you that the third amendment moved by Mr. James To be passed. Yes, Mr. To? After consideration, I think that the Secretary's amendment covers a wider scope when it comes to exemption. I wonder if I can, at this very second, withdraw the amendment or let it go ahead. You have already moved your motion. All right, then. I ask members to oppose to my amendment. Those in favor, please raise their hands. Those against, please raise their hands. The question is not agreed by a majority of each of the 2 groups of members, that is those returned by FC and those by GC who are present. I declare the amendment negatived. Before I put to you the question on Mr. James To's 4th amendment, I wish to remind members that if Mr. To's amendment is passed, the Secretary may not move his 1st amendment. And I'll put the question to you that the 4th amendment moved by Mr. James To be passed. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is not agreed by a majority of each of the 2 groups of members, that is those returned by GC and those returned by FC who are present. I declare the amendment negatived. Secretary for Transport and Housing, you may move your 1st amendment. Chairman, I move my 1st amendment to amend Clause 3 as set out in the appendix to the script. I propose the question to you that the first amendment moved by Secretary for Transport and Housing be passed. I now put the question to you as stated. Will those in favour please raise their hands? Those against please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by majority of members present. I declare the amendment passed. Secretary for Transport and Housing, you may move your second amendment. Chairman, I move my second amendment to further amend Clause 3 as set out in the appendix to the script. I propose the question to you that the second amendment moved by Secretary for Transport and Housing be passed. I now put the question to you as stated. Will those in favour please raise their hands? Those against please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority of the members present. I declare the amendment passed. As Mr. James To's fifth and sixth amendments are interdependent, I have accepted Mr. To's request that the two amendments will be voted upon together. Mr. James To, you may move your fifth and sixth amendments. Chairman, I move my fifth and sixth amendments to further amend Clause 3 as set out in the appendix to the script. This is related to the exterior wall. I propose the question to you that the fifth and sixth amendments moved by Mr. James To be passed. I now put the question to you as stated. Will those in favour please raise their hands? Mr. Hon James claims a division. The bell will be rung for 1 minute.
Voting begins. Please check your vote. Voting stop. Please show the results. The function constituency, 28 present, 8 agreed, 19 object. Geographic constituency, 26 present, agreed, 14. The Ting question is not agreed by a majority with respect of each of the two groups of members, as returned by the functionaries and geographic constituency. I declare the amendment negatived. Secretary of Transport Housing, you may move your third amendment. Chairman, I move my third amendment to further amend Clause 3 as set out in the appendix to the script. I propose the question to you that the third amendment moved by the Secretary for Transport and Housing be passed. Before I put to you the question on Secretary's third amendment, I wish to remind members that as the Secretary amendment is substantially the same as Honorable James To's seventh amendment, Honorable James To may not move his seventh amendment, irrespective of whether the Secretary amendment is passed or not. I now put the question to you that the third amendment moved by the Secretary for Transport and Housing be passed. Will those in favor please raise your hands? Those against please raise your hands. I think the question is agreed by the majority of members present. I declare the amendment passed. Honorable James To, you may move your eighth amendment. Chairman, I move my eighth amendment to further amend Clause 3 as set out in the appendix to the script. That had to do with the consideration documents by the collective stamp revenue. I propose a question to you that eighth amendment moved by Honorable James To be passed. I now put the question to you as asked. Would those in favor please raise your hand? Hon James asks for a division. Call for division.
開始表決。
Voting begins. Please check your vote. Voting stopped. Show the results. Functional constituency 29 present, 9 in favor, and 18 objects, 1 abstentions. Geographic constituency 27 present, 9 in favor, 12 object. The question is not agreed upon majority respective of each of the two groups of members, those returned by functional and geographic constituencies through direct elections who are present. I declare the amendment negatived. Clause 3 as amended. I now put the question to you that the Clause 3 amended stand part of the bill. Those in favor, please raise your hands. Those against, please raise your hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority of members present. I declare the motion passed. The proceedings of the Stamp Duty Amendment Number 2 bill have been concluded in the Committee of the Whole Council. Council now resumes. Secretary for Transport and Housing. President, I now report to the Council that the Stamp Duty Amendment Number 2 Bill 2017 has been passed by the Committee of the Whole Council with amendments. I move the motion that this Council adopts the report. I'll now propose the question to you that the motion moved by the Secretary for Transport and Housing be passed. In accordance, and those who in favor, please put up your hand. Those against, please raise your hands. I think the question is agreed with majority of members present. I declare the motion passed. Third reading. Stamp Duty Amendment.